start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Are there any comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda? All right, seeing none. David, I know we have a couple amendments. Do you want to go over those?
Sure. So after item 8, I felt it would be good to just put an update on collective bargaining.
Should we put on there just a brief discussion about the designation of central school as T4, the zoning
Probably that's
issue,
fine.
the
I know we
form-based
didn't have a
code
chance
issue?
to talk after, so maybe
I mean, just take a minute. Just
where do we want to put that?
Towards the end.
So maybe right after the district calendar, we
Or
can
how-
just do an update
How about on the city-school collaboration?
That's fine. Yep.
Put there.
I'd also like to have some small
Cities.
discussion about the big picture funding mechanism.
I'm sorry, Martin, your topic was again,
The form-based code city center designation of the central school
Okay.
property.
we're going to put that as like a 5A then,
Yeah.
after city-school collaboration. And Julie, you're looking for
The big picture funding mechanism.
where do you want to include that?
Probably after,
After the calendar?
yeah. that's
Okay,
probably
so
fine.
11A, we'll do big picture funding. All right, are there other changes?
No, I think I'll take that other one off when I get to it.
Okay, I think this is not a board self-evaluation, is it? Is this so does everybody have forms at their place?
Yep, there is. And I believe this is
Okay.
we're in the cycle.
So just a reminder to the board that one of our goals was to actually fill this out or to make notes during the meeting. And do we have extra copies, Delina, available for the public? Would it be possible to get some extra copies?
She's gonna get some, I think.
So we will provide some extra copies to the public. This is something we modified at our last meeting to request feedback on our board meetings. And the two forms that you'll see here would be a board meeting evaluation and superintendent feedback from the meeting. So this is a goal to enhance our own feedback process on how we're managing our meeting and our agenda time. So I'd encourage any of you to respond accordingly. And any other amendments?
No.
Okay. All right, we'll shift to agenda item 5, the city-school collaboration.
Again, I think those of you who are just here, I know we had some new folks join, and again, I think that was a helpful conversation to understand a little bit about kind of city planning around road construction, Market Street, et cetera, and understand some of those timelines as well as our stewardship and conversation. So as stated earlier, our meetings will continue, both Elizabeth and I meeting with Kevin Dorn and Pam McKenzie, and we'll continue to work with then Chris Shaw and Dan on kind of some scoping and making sure that communication and timeline can be provided. So again, I think it was helpful and really informative.
David, I was thinking just in response to the Market Street discussion that I think it's never too early to start taking an inventory of what, our activities are in the summertime and start keeping track of those.
Yeah. One good thing with that is that through our collaboration with the recreation folks and our own kind of facility scheduling software, we have a good past. Doesn't mean that it can't change. So point well taken, and that's will be really important on if there are going to be disruptions, where are we going to put them, during that road construction phase, and also disruptions in noise, et cetera. So it's a good point, and we're definitely well positioned to do that.
Good. You wanted to talk a little bit about form-based codes and impact on?
Sure. One of the things, and again, I cannot recall, it seems like we had a conversation about this at a board meeting not that long ago, and I think the direction by the board was transitioning the school property abutting the Market Street from a special district to a T4 district, what basically gave the property, again, from the perspective of the city, it made sense to change to the newer designation. And Martin, I don't know, I mean, I believe we talked about this before, but we need to provide the city with some general guidance as they have moved to form-based code or updating codes, and they feel that this T4 code would very much benefit us to adhere to that. It doesn't restrict us in any way. It allows for us to be able to do the things that we would need to do in the event.
I mean, the idea is, in the form-based code is that they have different levels of density and also structural forms that buildings are required to follow, with the so-called T5 being the most dense, and they have very strict building standards and such. T4 is a little bit less strict, but it does have certain restrictions for buildings and for lots and all those kind of things. But the school district right now, it would be deemed a special district. That's how it is right now. The downside to that is that if sometime in the future central school ceases to be there or the property gets diminished in any way, then there's not any code for how that could be developed. So for instance, well, I mean, the idea though is to have that designated a T4 zone, which if it's not used for school purposes in the future, this would be the code that would have to be followed, rather than having to deal with this however many years down the road. It might not be that long, because recall, there was a discussion tonight with the steering committee that Garden Street is going to be a new street, and it might cut into the central school property in the southeast corner, and might actually leave a piece of property on the other side of a street that the school might want to use for development of some sort. And this would allow that to occur if we want that to happen. And we've asked Paul Connor to go ahead and provide us some language that says this will be T4 zone, but it will stay as a special district, and the school district does not have to comply with all the various standards so long as it's being used for school purpose, something to that effect. And I asked him to provide us the language. And I guess the request I would have for you folks, and maybe we have to have, I don't know if we have to have a motion or if you just want to tell me, because they're on tight timeline, whether you want me in conjunction with David to look at whatever they provide to us and get back to them on behalf of the board and say, yeah, this looks fine or not, or do we need to have a special meeting if they need it right away, or do we push it to the first week of May? So that's kind of a
Do we
follow-up.
have a timeline that
Well,
we're,
the only thing that they've said is, again, they're getting close to a completed draft. And the staff owes them a red line draft by their next regular meeting.
Yeah, I
So-
think it could probably wait till, I mean, if I can look at it initially, and if I think it's really out of whack, I'll tell them, and I'll say that it's just me, but we'll take it up with the rest of the board. It's not like this is the final shot we would have at it. But
So I think it could be
take an
added to our
initial
May,
look.
is that right? May 7th meeting
Yeah, probably.
for action, which would give us enough time to make sure that you have the language in front of you. Martin's had the opportunity, as well as I, to kind of vet it for that clarity would be fine. Again, they're, I think, wanting to make sure we're on board and being informed, so.
okay. Any other questions or comments on that? All right. Okay, we'll shift to agenda item 6, an update on the methadone clinic.
So there's no new information to report. We're still, again, waiting for the Vermont Supreme Court to rule on the case, in which was heard last month. Again, as I said before, it could be any time, or it could be, I'm going to say a month and a half now instead of 2 months, but that's kind of the general window that we believe the response will be provided. Other than that, we continue to have all of our safety protocols and procedures in place, and we're continuing. So,
Good. Yes, Kathy.
Thanks. I wanted to ask if it might be appropriate, you've seen it obviously all over the media, especially this week, right, the heroin epidemic, and I'm wondering if it might be appropriate to send out something about it to the media sources about the fact that it's so close to our schools. I think in the greater world at large, that seems quite obscene. And if they were perhaps enlightened to that, things might swing a different way.
Well, I think the process is in place. The district on behalf of our constituents has taken it to the Vermont Supreme Court. So that's the ruling we're waiting on at this point.
But is that the only thing that we can be doing? I mean, if all eyes are on this topic right now at this moment, wouldn't it maybe be prudent to step out in front a little bit and say, yes, this is an epidemic, and look how close this is to our students?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we've ever had a conversation about a media campaign specific to that.
It's all over. NBC News is doing a report this whole week.
Yeah, oh no, I've seen a lot of the
sure.
coverage in the media. Yes.
Right. Just a thought.
Yeah.
I don't think it can hurt much.
Well, I know I'll speak personally because this is not a conversation the board has had, but I know some of the emphasis the media has had on drug driving, I think, is very relevant to the appeal that's in place right now. So, any other comments on any other action we might take at this point? Okay. All right. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 7, update on the proposed grade 5 transition.
So again, there's been a lot of work that's happened. What I know, though, is that the last meeting for the whole committee was canceled. I think people needed some additional time. The steering committee did get together for an hour and a half or so, almost 2 hours, and I believe they're pondering a lot of questions and a lot of feedback, working really hard. And so I know they'll be providing me with some additional information as I'm sad to say, or quick to say, that June is fast approaching. So I know there's an awful lot of questions out there around the timeline and how that decision will be made. And again, I want to be clear that if time is needed to continue to do the work, then I'm going to be sensitive, obviously, to that and not push to have a decision before you. Also, what I know is that I'm open to meet. I have a meeting scheduled at Orchard, I think, next week. Somebody know when I said that? I think Delina, Monday. So I'll be at Orchard with some of the PTO folks, and I'm encouraged to have anyone who wishes to connect with me on that to continue our conversations and discussion.
What time's that scheduled for, David?
6:30.
Thank you, Dylan.
Their meeting starts at 6. You go on at 6:30.
So, anyway, and that's all I have.
Has there been any specific requests from any of the working committees for an extension of that date?
Not yet. Again, not that I know of. Again, I've been really trying to be conscious to not being sitting in on committees.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may not like that, but I've been really trying to allow the committees to do the work. Some of it, I definitely know that there's questions that are coming back, like we need more time, we have requests for information,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, and I've just, been clear with the steering committee to continue to do their work, help where I can, and I do know that some of them have said we're feeling really stretched and stressed about getting all of this information in, and so.
Okay. It sounds like you might be expecting that at some point.
Yeah, I think that's true. Again, I want to be clear that this is an area where I want to continue to collect information so that we can be informed,
Mm-hmm.
and I can then inform you of the status, where we are, and a recommendation. So
Gotcha.
anyway,
Any other board questions or comments? All right, anybody in the public? Yes.
I just wanted to comment on the, I'm part of the steering committee, and I do believe that the time is an anxiety, or not anxiety isn't the word I really want to use, but is an issue that has come up among the committees. And I know as a steering committee that we have met about that. So I just wanted that to be clear, that, yeah, there has certainly been that through the minutes and through the agenda items.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Melissa.
Yes.
Kathy Barrazzo, on the Orchard PTO. As many of you probably already know, the Orchard and the Central PTO sent a survey out to their families asking for their opinion about the proposed change, specifically because we're getting a lot of comments from our parents that they're frustrated that they feel like they're not getting a voice. And so we were hoping that this would help them feel like they're being listened to. It was a very simple survey. It was 4 questions. 2 of them were demographic. What schools do your children attend, and what grades are they in, just so we could get a feel for who was responding. The other 2 were pretty simple questions. The first was, do you agree with the proposal? Yes, no, or unsure. And the fourth question was, why? Why do you have the opinion that you have? We had 417 responses, and they were amazing. We have a phenomenal cache of data now that I think would be very helpful. We're planning on sharing it with the committees. We wanted to take a minute to share some of the highlights with you. We did bring copies of all the data, all the comments that people made, because as I mentioned, they're amazing comments, and it really gives you a good view into how people are feeling about this change. So basically, as the chart shows, 64% of the people responded no, they do not agree with the proposal. 22% were unsure, and 14% said yes. What we did is we went through some of the data, and we just tried to get common themes from the responses that they had. And I think that's where the most valuable information is coming from. When we looked at the yes questions, we found 37% of them were happy that it was going to provide students with a richer academic opportunities. So things like foreign languages, band, technology, clubs, and sports were all things that were mentioned. I should back up for a sec. Some of the people, whether or not you wanted to put a comment in was optional. So in this case, there were 58 votes that said yes, but only 38 of them had comments. So the 37% is actually 37% of the 38. Some of the other comments were that they felt like 5th graders had outgrown elementary school already, and that they also pointed out that other schools were successful with the same configuration. And the no votes, overwhelmingly, people felt that 5th graders are simply too young to go into middle school. Socially, emotionally, developmentally, they're very passionate about this point in the comments. Several people mentioned that 5th graders really belong in an elementary environment, not in a middle school environment. Not specifically talking about Tuttle, just in general. And then 39% also commented how great our elementary schools are and how wonderful that 5th grade year is, and that they felt that that is never going to be able to be duplicated, and those kids will not get the same benefits having 5th grade and middle school that they're getting at in the elementary schools. Many people talked about the leadership that the kids gain from being 5th graders at that school, and how they're ready for it, that they are on, they're about to become adolescents, but they're not there yet, but they're ready to accept the challenge of being 5th graders and being the big kids in the school. Also, there's a lot of people felt that there was no clear, compelling reason to do that. They felt like if they understood maybe the why, maybe they'd have a different opinion, but they felt like there's no reason that we're doing this. The elementary school's great. So many people use the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. On the unsure, again, overwhelming response to people that just felt like they needed more information. Either they didn't understand the why, or they didn't know what it would look like, they weren't clear, they didn't want to make an answer to the question. They also had some concerns in there. They were concerned about 5th graders interacting with 8th graders. So they were, a lot of them would say in their answers that, I'm not sure if it's a good thing or not, but I am concerned about this, that my 5th grader could be in there hearing what the 8th graders are hearing. And then they also mention that they did like the opportunity to have foreign language and band in 5th grade. They just weren't sure whether that was worth the cost that might incur, and they felt they needed more information. So we do, if you're interested, we have copies of the 300 some odd comments that we have. We're happy to share them with you. We're going to share them with the steering committee. We felt that this was information that the board should have and that the steering committee should have. Because clearly the parents aren't happy, but they also have a lot of intelligent reasons why they're not unhappy, or why they're not happy. And we think it's important to include this. And I think a lot of our parents were very thankful that Central and Orchard PTOs actually sent this out to them. In fact, some of them posted on Front Porch Forum. So based on some of the data, I think that it's perhaps people who had kids in high school actually filled this form out, not just kids in Orchard and Central. Thank you. Yeah.
The information, I just wondered, was there any outreach to Chamberlain? Or do you
We
think-
tried to go through the PTO a couple of times. In fact, originally, Jen McGahey and I, who's at Central, we all actually met together to talk about how the parents were feeling. And Chamberlain was actually the ones who started the survey. And I'm not sure why, we haven't heard back, but they chose. And they chose not to participate. Just as I was about to close the survey down on Monday, because we gave everybody a week, I sent them another email and I haven't heard anything from them. So I wish it would be great to hear from them too. Yes.
I have a question. Did this survey get administered through the committee process that's in
No,
place? Or
it was the
it's outside?
PTOs that did it.
Reason why it wasn't done within the committee?
Because the
process?
PTOs were because our parents were coming to us and the PTOs decided to do it. That's right.
I should say, and Mark can back me up on this, we're part of the Community Outreach Committee. I'm on the steering committee, but Mark and I sit on the Community Outreach Committee. And Donna Kazmarek, who's the PTO president of Chamberlain, did actually present it to the committee and say, the PTOs are thinking of sending this, do you want it to come from the committee? And the consensus there was that they weren't feeling like it was appropriate to send now. They wanted to survey people after they had more information. So she said it's up to basically Holly Ruel is running the Community Outreach Committee, and they told Donna, the PTOs can do what they want, but it's not going to be coming from a committee at this point. They weren't ready to put it out.
Right. And we did inform them when we sent it out.
Joanne.
Joanne Godek had sent us an email saying, we know that you're thinking about this. This is why we think you shouldn't. And Jennifer and I sent, when we thought about it and decided that the parents needed to be heard and it was getting ugly. And so to diffuse it a little bit, we thought this would help. And we let Joanne know. And she knows, and she has said they'd like to see a copy of the material, the results, which, we closed the survey on Monday, so about an hour ago, I was still typing things in. So she will get the survey results, as will all, we also told the parents that we'll send the information, not the details of the 300, but we'll send them the high-level information. So everybody kind of gets to see it.
And so, can I just ask who wrote the questions?
Oh, okay, so originally, Donna from the PTO, we said we wanted to keep it very simple. So Donna originally wrote them, and we all reviewed them. Jennifer, Donna, and I, so the 3 PTO presidents, reviewed them. We all ran them past other people, like other board members and we all agreed to them. And then Chamberlain decided not to do them. So I turned around, so technically I typed them in, so my wording is probably slightly different than Donna's was, but they were originally, hers with everybody's. Okay, and they're so simple, it was a pretty easy, we didn't want to sway anybody. We just wanted to know their opinion and give them an opportunity to vent, or either way, they could tell us what they were thinking.
And based on your number of responses and our number of 5th graders at both of those schools, it looks like you had multiple responses per household.
No, so you couldn't respond twice from the same computer. That said, SurveyMonkey lets you set it up. So you couldn't respond more than once. And it went to everybody. It didn't just go to 5th grade. Like, it went to everybody at the school. So K through 5, whoever was on the PTO distribution lists. So I know in my case at Orchard, my list is not as big as the school's list because some people they don't like to get emails from me. So I don't try to take that personally. But, and I'm sure the same is true at Central. So it went to a subset. I would guess that, I know I sent it to my husband because he's not on the distribution list, and I said, you should fill this out. I tried not to tell them what to put in the answers, but.
So when you, did people self-identify as a fifth grade, fourth grade,
Yeah,
third
and
grade,
interestingly-
high school? So do you know how many fifth grade?
Yes,
like-
there were 2 questions for demographic. There was, yeah, the 2 questions were, do you, what grade, or what schools do your children go to? So none, because I actually got a few of those. So it also, I'm guessing that some of the none people didn't want to identify themselves also.
And
But
actually,
none,
I forwarded to some of my neighbors that have incoming
right.
kindergartners.
So we knew, and we could see that on the second question. So that was either none or our 5 schools were listed. So you could click on which schools. So I have a child at Orchard, I clicked Orchard, and I clicked Tuttle, for example. Okay, so you could identify which schools your kids were at. You could, then the second question was, what grades are they in? And so we knew, and interestingly, the most number of the grade that was represented the most was 2nd grade, followed closely by 3rd grade. But we had 12th graders, we had some of everything. I mean, obviously, there weren't as many high schoolers. I looked at the data, because one of the comments that I saw early on was that one of the yes comments were if they had gone through Tuttle, then they would know that this would be okay. So I thought, well, that's an interesting question, right? So if people have kids at Tuttle, will they respond differently than if you just have a 2nd grader? So I pulled the data just for Tuttle, and to see of all the people who responded, what happened. And it went, the percent that said no, I do not agree with this proposal, was 55. So it did go down a little bit. The sample space was a little bit smaller too, so I don't know if that affected it, but it was 55%. The yeses went up a little bit, and the unsure stayed pretty much the same. So it was, but I actually even looked at the data, like I looked at Central versus Orchard to see if there was a big difference, and it was pretty much the same, 64, 22, 17 split, or 22, whatever the other number is, 14% split.
So will this be provided either in a presentation or in some kind of summary report to the working groups then?
Yeah, I'm thinking, we have to figure it all out, because like I said, an hour ago, I still typed stuff in. I'm guessing we'll probably give them the comments, because really that's where the guts, this is kind of just the overview. This is what I think we'll probably share with the families. And then I think we'll probably share this and the notes. We have 48 pages of an Excel spreadsheet of just comments.
I'm sure this will be of value to the working committees for sure.
Thanks.
So thanks for taking the time to do that.
No problem.
I think it is. I think it's good information for the committees. Also, as the board knows, there's many avenues. The frequently asked questions, I think, are they're working to try to respond to those. Number one, respond that we received your question, but then begin to answer them when we have answers that we can provide the committees. That is. So I think pulling this information together is going to be really helpful to the informed decision, and I think will provide us the opportunity to, for me to provide some direction and information to you, the board.
Good.
So.
Great. Is there one more comment?
Yeah, quickly. So I sit on the community outreach board, and also I've been listening in on the steering committee. And so I think you're going to hear soon that everybody needs more time. And I think that's coming down the pike fairly quickly. And I also feel like people are just starting to get their feet underneath them in these committees and figuring out where they need to get the information from and how they're going to gather the information. And we're all feeling a little bit up against the wall because, some of it is, we want to talk to 6th graders, but we need their parents' permission to do that. And we need to do that before school gets out because, and what happens when school gets out and the parents can't come to the committee meetings because now everybody's got their kids home. So it is a little tough, and we want to be able to go and observe schools that are using this, effectively, and talk to people that have used it, maybe not effectively. And so, boy, it's just an amazing amount of work to get done in committees that are meeting every other week. The intentions are good, people's hearts are really in it. They're trying hard, but I think, at least for our committee, it took us 3 weeks just to figure out what it was that we were supposed to be doing, much less how we were going to do it and how we were going to achieve anything. So, and it's a lot to ask by June, I guess is what I'm saying.
Again, thanks for the feedback, Mark. And again, just the clarity on your committee and your participation on that committee. One of the things that's currently out there, I think the steering committee is going to push out some specific questions on kind of where are you now, what are the to be able to get some specific feedback around then an informed decision. Obviously, it sounds like community outreach has got a lot of work that's left, and so that I think will be, as I said, I owe it to the committees to provide direct response, based on that feedback, and we'll be making that decision based on some of that. So I think when this initially was proposed by me, it was done in a way that I thought would give us a whole year, but we obviously didn't start right off at the beginning. And I think that, the timeline or backwards planning is perhaps, looking like that additional time will be needed.
And that's kind of the other ongoing theme, David, is people seem overwhelmed. They look at, what it would take to do this, and more importantly, to do this well, and to do it in a way that makes the new model better than the old model. And that's the bottom line. It has to be better. It can't be as good as, it's got to be better moving forward. And to do that, one of the things that came up in our committee was a mentoring program with 7th and 8th graders for 5th and 6th graders. It's like, that's an awesome idea. What a great opportunity. But how do you put that into place in a year's time or even 2 years' time? And so there could be some great things that came out of this, but boy, oh boy, the details is pretty overwhelming.
Well, again, I appreciate it. I know the steering committee's they've been doing some work and pushing out some information to the other committees, and I'm likely to provide some updates to each of the committees and back to the board as well. So thanks for the feedback.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, our student representative report. Who wants to go?
One of the big things that's been going on for the past few weeks, I think, the 2 hockey teams, boys and girls, have been leading a Bald for Burke effort. And so I think it's next Wednesday, people from the O'Brien Salon Institute or something like that are coming in, and a lot of people will be shaving their heads to show their support. But they've also been selling T-shirts to raise money for a charity. I don't remember the name, but it's for to support families that have been impacted by cancer. So that's been pretty great. I think we've got quite a few people who have signed up and pledged to support, and they've sold some T-shirts. So I think next Wednesday is like Bald for Burke Day. So
We had 3 people that jumped the gun.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Shake your head.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's all good.
It's all good. Thank you.
Yes. So with the student council, this is kind of next month, but we're planning our blood drive, our spring blood drive, and it's on May 22nd. We'll probably have more info about that later, but
Is it
yeah.
at school?
Yes. Yeah. And Sabina and I are a big part of that. So we'll be running that on the day. So that's exciting, and planning that's going to be fun. As we said a lot of times, spring sports have finally started. The weather has been really awesome, and they just had their first track meet today. So that's a good start to the season.
When was the weather really awesome?
I mean, not snowing. Yeah, today.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Also, AP exams are coming up, so students are studying. They're going to be studying over April vacation, and so it's kind of a stressful time, but it's good.
So I see you have the invitations, but our arts festival is coming up next week. That's always really exciting. The art's really cool. The seniors have their showcase things, which are really interesting to see. The food is really good. So yeah, if you can stop by, you definitely should. I would recommend it.
Sabina, what's the date on that?
Next Wednesday, the
16th.
16th.
I think that's the first time since I've been on the board that we don't have a board.
It is.
I think you're right.
So I will be there.
I want to go.
Yay! Yeah,
Great.
definitely
So
recommend
both
it.
during the day and at night, right?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. And then, so
One of the things that I've been working on this year with Miss Weaver is like starting an alternative justice board, which is kind of at the high school, which is similar in structure to like a reparative board. And so we've had like a group of students who have been like training and stuff, and we're getting that started soon. So yeah. Just wanted to
So
bring that up.
who would go to that board?
So we originally thought it would be like bullying, but it could include other things such as like academic dishonesty or other issues. I don't know,
So it's
vandalism.
internal.
Yeah, internal and not legal. So, but it would be a slightly different process, and instead of just like a suspension or going straight to Miss McDonald and having only one person deal with that, or Mr. Phillips or Miss Weaver, it would be more like a board, and the process is slightly different, and it's more about like reintegrating or integrating it in general, the student back into the school community.
Are you able to look at models that are being practiced?
Yeah, to be a member of the board, you have to do 2 observations at the South Burlington Reparative Board and then 1 at another towns. So I did Winooski, but they're all over. There's Burlington, Williston, Essex.
It's modeled off the reparative board,
Yeah.
though. Yeah, great. Good.
Wonderful.
All right, thank you. All right, we have agenda item 8A, an update on collective bargaining, and do you want me to go ahead and
Sure.
give that, David? I think we've reported in the past that we are in negotiations with all 3 of our employee groups, our administrators, our support staff, and our teachers. And I did want to give an update tonight that our current, specific to the SBEA, our Teachers Association, the current contract expires on June 30th of this year. And both the board and the SBA had an initial meeting to commence negotiation of a successor agreement in early December of last year. And we've met since then a total of, including that meeting, a total of 8 times to discuss new contract terms. We met most recently Monday of this week, and at the end of this meeting, the board declared that negotiations were at impasse. So based on that, the parties are going to move now into the next stage of the process, which would be to engage with an impartial mediator. And we hope to have that meeting scheduled in the next month or so. So I just wanted to make sure we're updating the community on the status of those negotiations, and that's where we stand right now. Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll move to agenda item 9, the superintendent's report.
So for my report, I have one item that I actually have at your place is an updated copy of the paper performance information. And the change there, what's highlighted in red in your packet is job description information. But what's in your packet just provides an overview of paper performance as identified in the article in the contract for the teachers. Also, the Appendix B, which is part of the contract as well, which I think some of you perhaps have not seen in the past, which is in your packet. And then a little bit of information about the specifics of the paper performance goal, the steps to complete it, the product and the outcome. And so the idea here is not to regurgitate all of it, but to try to provide some level of, just overview of what the goal was. And then also in your packet was a draft rubric of something we've been working on to put some additional, what I'm going to say, clarity into how we would move forward. Again, this is a little bit, it needs to coincide with the contract work, although we can make some recommended changes around Appendix B or our new rubric, we'll call it. And so we, again, wanted to just provide you with this information, and this is, again, connected to the RFP, which is connected to the last information, the last board meeting information where I gave you kind of also the evaluation work. Again, just trying to bring that into into your view as well. So anyway, I think I'm happy to take questions. Stuart also has done a fair amount of work. Again, I do want to say that this remains a critical area for me in the district. In my time, it remains a critical area for us around district office work, around looking at evaluations, looking at how we can continue to help advance our work in the district, and helping our administrators provide effective, good evaluations. So
I felt a couple years ago, and feel the same now, that the plans are not uniformly or consistently rigorous as far as what is required. And I know that 2 years ago, we suggested that there be a clearinghouse at the central office, that administration, you or designee, would make sure that this is being consistently applied among the schools. And I guess I'd like an update on whether that has happened, and if not, whether we should continue to discuss whether that should happen, because I don't think, frankly, that we're necessarily getting our money's worth for these different goals that have been achieved. Yeah, I don't mean to, in all cases. I mean, it's an inconsistency. I mean, some of them are great. And some of them, they're all fine, but some of them are, there's much more to it than others. There's not consistent, and they're not uniformly rigorous, as far as at least the descriptions that I have here.
yeah, I think that your observations, it's hard to make everything the same level of rigor, at least in appearance. In some cases, there's some work that may be small, but may have huge impacts on the outcomes. For instance, some of them may be, it could be looking at a process for TIE and developing information and communication. We may say that's not rigorous enough. The outcome is maybe significant to the district. So absolutely, and that's part of what we're trying to do with the rubric. And again, we've been working on this. Part of it does need to coincide with Appendix B a little, although we can make changes to the contract. We can have side letters. So I do feel that there's opportunities, and have been opportunities. We've worked to try to ensure there's some consistency across schools. That also is part and play around what teachers want to bring to you, right? And so committee work, and in Appendix B, it has again, this was established some time ago. There's a fair, I would say some pretty significant breadth here of opportunities. And perhaps, what we're doing with the rubric is maybe too narrow. But
So David, when Martin and I reviewed this a couple years ago with all the administrators, we talked about what we could do related to Appendix B, and I was under the impression that we could change this so that it could be going through the central office, and there could be some added rigor more consistently applied. I was under that impression from you. Was I mistaken about that?
no, we can, under the guidelines, we have the opportunity to talk about, you're at the black line, and these are our ideas and recommendations, and in many cases I think there's that there's some correlation to that. In some cases, not as much. And so I think we've done better with that, around having those conversations, at least, number one, recognizing more about the pay performance goal, recognizing who's at it, recognizing that we can use it to and so I during my time, I feel like we've used it more than probably ever in the past. I think we have a ways to go.
Does it currently go through your office?
It does. They come through us. To say I read every single one of them, no, but I've looked at them. I've had conversations with a lot of them. And I think that it is a positive arm. And I think it's an avenue that we can continue to improve on. So again, that's not really the point here. The point really is to give you kind of the information as it's connected, kind of that, the drill down or the observation that's there. So I want to be careful not to over talk it. I want to let you asked me those questions, which you're doing, so.
Well, I guess, I mean, and I do recall, and just looking at the Appendix B as well, that we came to the conclusion, I think correctly so, that we didn't have to modify Appendix B. We needed it to be administered more closely. And there were a couple in the group that we looked at that we thought just did not seem to connect up to what Appendix B asked for. And we wanted to make sure that there was a process in place that wouldn't happen again. So maybe it's a matter of the fact that it's hard to understand really what they've done with just these summaries and brief explanations.
Yeah. Or the outcomes that they've had.
May not fully give a full flavor for the effort that had to go into it, or the results. And I agree that it's a combination. It's the efforts and it is the outcome, and probably the outcome is more important. But
I think limiting the scope, maybe limiting or being more specific around the desires that are specifically attached to the work we're trying to do as a district, advancing within the academic areas in which classroom teachers, high school, middle school may be, advancing our work on our ends. Those are certainly perhaps focused, but maybe too focused, So anyway, I mean, that's our charge right now. Our discussions that have been in play around the rubric have been ones that, I think have been really positive.
Do you have a timeline on putting the rubric into place?
Well, part of our work right now, for me, is as we approach, the mapping of another year, and as we move forward, some of what you heard, some of the stuff around kind of the facility side and financing side, but is advancing our work. You've heard a lot about Common Core. You've heard a lot about the new standards. You've heard a lot about, obviously, our rewrite at the ends or your ends. You've heard a lot about our math and our literacy work, and so MTSS, if I didn't say that already. How does that all fit? And where are we at now, and what are we trying to accomplish? What I want to see is then, again, I hold Stuart responsible, along with the other central office administrators, is where are we at now? What do we need to do to improve? And what are the things that are going to help us do that? I do think that this is an arm of that can say, for these areas we need help in, I'm going to pick Common Core. And actually, Stuart's got many of his folks working in that area that are not necessarily assigned to that. Some are doing that in their work. So making sure there's some clarity and opportunities for staff to do that. Obviously, it's not going to all happen through pay for performance, but what other resources do we have as a district that can help make that happen? So it's really aligning that work and looking at what avenues we have to make that happen. Evaluation in and of itself is an arm, right? How are you doing in your instruction, and how are you working towards meeting the needs of students in our various academic areas, as well as if you have an overarching objective that's outside your classroom, how can that be used? And again, remember that people get to that line if they don't do anything, and there's a few that haven't done that, and they sit there. They don't advance. So there's some mechanisms in that obviously you've heard.
I understand that it's part of a bigger process, but my question remains, it's 2 years later since we've said that it needed more rigor, and it's not in place. So when will it be in place?
I do think there's more rigor.
Okay.
I don't think we're where we want to be. I don't know that we'll ever be there necessarily, because there's always a little bit of a moving target. But I will say that from my perspective, for my 9 years, I think the conversations are times 10 of what it used to be around this. And so I think it's
I'm sorry to push it, but I have to say that for you to say will never be there is not really acceptable for me.
Let me be clear. I think as long as we have students in our buildings and learning occurring, we're always going to have initiatives that are going to be forthcoming. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Common Core, new generations, new science standards, all kinds of different things are going to come along the way. We're going to need to work to adhere to those. Now, I don't know what those all will be to the future. I think this in and of itself is always going to be kind of a continuation of we we want you to get better, we want to get better. And so there's always a continuation of this work, I see. So I don't think we're ever going to get necessarily to that, and this is an arm to help us.
And I guess that kind of goes to perhaps the whole thing is misnamed, misunderstood, because it's not performance pay. And
Good point.
And I've heard it's suggested in certain quarters that this, is somehow performance pay and leads to a teacher being a master teacher and such. And I see no connection between these projects. Well, maybe little connection. These are one-off projects. And sometimes certainly some of them certainly could, I see, improve the performance of the particular teacher and justify the particular teacher moving on. But they're not all that way. They are all more driven, it seems, somewhat by the needs of the individual schools and the building administrators. And then there's a mutual agreement to get this done because it's work that has to be done. And I'm all for that. That makes sense. I mean, get the teachers who know how to do this stuff, pay them for their service to do this. But it's not performance pay. And that's what maybe I'm hung up on a little bit, that somehow this is like project-based. It's project pay, but it allows you to make the next step in the whole grid system. So maybe that's where the issue. That is a contract issue as opposed to an administration issue. But we're trying to administer something that is misconstrued, perhaps.
I think when you look at the examples, and I think you're right. It's again, we could narrow the focus to be specific to instruction and instruction only.
Right, and I'm not saying that these are not important.
Yep, I hear you.
These things are important. They're important to the individual administrators, but it's disconnected more than half of the time.
Good observation.
To really being somehow performance enhancing. So
Does this come up could this come up under the umbrella of some monitoring report? Because it seems like we need to talk about it more frequently, just to have a check-in.
What I would say is, again, we kind of had this conversation a little bit earlier around like evaluation, kind of monitoring. And I mean, I think that we could provide you with, and I can certainly provide you with information on a regular basis around the uses. I don't know that you're going to want to get into the nuts and bolts. That's part of my job, is to see, again, I think Martin's right, whether it's project-based, advancement, or could rename that. But I certainly can provide an ongoing.
I agree that we don't want to get into the nuts and bolts, but we do want some kind of confirmation that there has been added rigor to what's currently in place, and that's.
So Julie, I don't disagree with you at all, 'cause that's why I've been working on this rubric. But I do want to point out that it is contractual in that it says, for example, sitting on a committee is an example of performance pay, and this is grievable material. So it's a fine line as you're building the rigor.
I appreciate that.
And Stuart's right, although I think that there's general buy-in, again, through our union to continue to provide clarity to this. And again, if you look at Appendix B, it's pretty extensive. And I don't know that there'd be a lot of pushback, from when we roll this out. Again, we're working on this administratively. Probably would be welcomed clarity for many of them. So it is what it is. And
Well, I think what I'm hearing is, I think you're hearing kind of a general level of feedback in terms of the original feedback, which was really the uniformity and the consistent rigor around the goal setting. I think one of the things that the board could use would be feedback whether this should rise to the level during a regular negotiation cycle of a discussion point. And if not, what would be a way to kind of, whether it's a side letter or just a dialogue around buy-off on the rubric that would get us to something else. I think there's also an interest in understanding just even the way this got reported out, to say the outcome was just achieved. It really, I assume that these goals are set as objectives and then I assume there's a result, which is characterized a little bit like a product here, but it also could be an impact,
Resulting impact.
particularly based on the rubric that has been recommended. So just an understanding of if it makes perfect sense to me that if we have staff that is rising to a level in their experience that they could contribute in a meaningful way to some needs within the district, whatever you call it, and be recognized for that, it's just good resource utilization to put some definition and rigor around that. And the other thing I think of, which is a little bit counterintuitive, is this in some ways becomes a bit of an R&D investment on behalf of the
absolutely.
district. And, frankly, we don't see failures. And I think we
right.
could learn as much from staff investing in something really innovative that maybe doesn't meet the mark, but the learnings that might be associated with it would allow the next go-round to be even better or more successful. And that's something we don't see. I guess I can't say that I've ever seen it, which doesn't make any sense that we.
Well, as a result of the failure and what was learned and how that then.
Well, a failure
propelled the next-
to achieve the objective, but what the outcome
propelled the
was.
outcome, right? Part of the rubric, again, we've got more work to do and there's more to this, but, that is in part, in the rubric, it's about, having clarity around where the goal is. And, we aren't obviously going to award something for a goal or objective that's beginning or progressing, but it has to reach a level of mastery. And I think, to be clear, it needs to have some level of, I'm not trying to just create busy time, but I don't want to have something where one person can do, I'm going to exaggerate, 5 hours of work, and somebody does 80 hours of work, or I'm just picking those two, and they both get rewarded, right? And there needs to be, based on time bound, based on, effect.
Complexity,
And so, and that's kind of what we're trying to get at in the rubric here. Again, administratively, we have this, this is an ongoing conversation at our admin meetings and will be on our retreat. And again, until the board, through negotiations makes a change, it's an avenue for us to be able to use. And I certainly don't want to sit here and say that it's been perfect, but certainly a focused area of attention for me.
Any other comments, questions?
I've not spent as much time looking at this as some of the others have. But listening to the conversation, it seems clear to me that there are a few things that need to be reinforced. One is there needs to be some mechanism that assures consistency at some level that goes on. I like the idea of it being considered as a R&D investment for the district to expand its ability to do something, and having the persons who was involved in it kind of demonstrated as a measure of their ability to accomplish something at a certain task, which I personally think once you've demonstrated that ability to do that, you don't quickly lose it. I mean, so it only begs the question in my mind, should it be repeated several times over the course of a career? Okay, so, but, I'm less hung up on the name as the value, and I do understand the disconnect between what I understand pay for performance to be and what this appears to be, okay? They just aren't connected, okay? But on the other hand, I think that when I see these things without knowing any of the detail of it, you have to demonstrate a certain level of competence and a certain ability to go beyond where you actually are to do many of these tasks. Perhaps some of them you can do in a closet by yourself, but most of them look like things that are broader than that. So I think if we could adopt a different viewpoint on it and if somewhere along the line change the name of the thing, that it could well be a very valuable thing for the district. But it is not pay for performance as I understand it, that concept.
Okay.
And I agree, with the uniformity and the rigor, and I think that leads to more equity, because if you have two people that are achieving the same sort of reward and one person is working much harder than another, it's not really fair to those two professionals. And so I like the idea of having some uniformity and a standard.
Yeah, I would only caution that sometimes the intensity and the amount of time that gets put into an effort is more a measure of the inability of the person to do the job than the ability of the person to do the job, okay? So sometimes the right person with the right abilities can accomplish an awful lot with what appears to be no effort. So I think you have to look at value,
Right.
not just effort.
Right, well, I don't think time put into the project is necessarily the best measure.
Right.
But like, there should still be an equal standard of,
No, I
Quality.
agree on the value level, and that's a challenge, and where the
Yeah, I mean, I
rubric
think the
is.
determination of
That's
the
where,
time-
that's where the rubric's gonna get stretched, is
That's
to
right.
how do you establish and quantify and settle on value, okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, I think that it is a tricky, that is a tricky piece to say, well, it's gonna take me, 50 hours. How can you, there's some justification on those hours and how those hours are spent, spinning or?
To use a sports analogy, okay, some people can hit home runs without even trying, other people can work at it day in and day out for months and months and months and never be able to hit one, okay?
Not in their disposition. Okay, thanks for the feedback.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, executive limitations policy. And do we have action on both of these? No, we don't. We have action on 2.1?
Right.
Okay.
And actually, 3.2 is really going to be a handout, and I'll go over that when we get to that, and just kind of update you on what you have in your packet. So 2.1. So this is the second time you're seeing this, and we've tried to, this is not easy, because you had the last time Diane did a diligent job trying to take the red line overstrike and kind of go back and forth, she and Julie, and we know that wasn't easy. So we've made some changes that we think are reflective then of those. What's highlighted would either be what's changed, and then what's lined out is what's been taken out. And so, and again, I've worked to try to incorporate at least the feedback that I had and provided some additional clarity where there were questions. So again, this is up for action, but obviously if we're not, depending on where we're at. So
what would be the best way to proceed?
I think we can walk through it. Again, in fairness to what Martin said, walking through it, and the folks
Thanks,
that.
Sabina. Good night.
Bye, Sabina. And Julie and Diane maybe can also just provide some additional comment if helpful. So. That's right. That's good.
Not.
I didn't say you would. Just, they're the committee folks. I gotta give them the first shot, Martin. All right.
Who would like to start?
Go ahead.
I don't have anything on detail policy 1. I mean, I guess people should, if we're gonna go through the whole thing, I would just like to name the detail policy, the interpretation, and have feedback from anybody, because I don't have new things since the last time on everything, just a couple things, So detail policy 1, elicit information for which there is no need. Any comments? Okay. Detail policy 2. Okay. Detail policy 3. Oh.
Just to note that students, I did notice that students was added into
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that was
That
our
was
main
good.
issue, so that's great.
I want to just read that policy too.
Oh, sure.
The public.
Detail policy 2, fail to solicit appropriate input or obtain necessary information to fulfill the district's ends policy or comply with the district's policy limitations. And we added students. It said parent solicit feedback from parents, guardians, and we thought it was important to add students there too. So that's now included. Okay. Detail policy 3, use methods of collecting, reviewing, transmitting, or storing student family information that fail to protect against improper access to the material elicited. should that say elicited or solicited? Is that, I'm trying to, elicited, okay.
Major thrust of the change of the interpretation is on that, David?
So what was on there before, maintaining, basically, from what I recall when I was doing this, was instead of regurgitating essentially the policy, I felt it was important to provide the interpretation, in that the district has a responsibility to maintain the level of confidentiality and safety so that it doesn't jeopardize confidentiality and access to student and family information. So that's the way I felt it was more adequate from the way it was interpreted before.
And Julie and I had some concerns about the wording, so I think this makes it more
Simplified it,
clear.
maybe?
I was fine
I don't think there was a major, I mean,
Clear.
yeah,
No, I'm fine
that's,
with it, I just wanted to understand.
yep,
Fine.
it was about wordiness. I'm good at that sometimes.
And the evidence that was added was the safe schools piece. And I think I had a comment there, and I think this covers it, but just that it's not just health professionals, but other professionals within the district that have access to confidential student information. And so the fact that everybody has to go through this training and that there's an automated system to make sure that everybody goes through that and that that's there as evidence is good.
Employees.
The substitute nurses go through that training as well. Is that true?
Right. Well, first of all, the substitute nurses don't necessarily have the same access.
Okay.
They have to have enough access to do the things that they need to do. But when, anyone who comes through our they have to go through the sub-training, which also has confidentiality. Now, most of our subs currently around Safe School, because we've implemented that within the last couple months, not all of them have gone through the Safe School, but they've been provided our confidentiality information, kind of either whole group or in person. Safe School will be a much improved process because, substitutes come and go different times, and that's been a difficult area for us in the past. So all employees, and it's the desire is that on the job descriptions will be clear about, again, all employees need, I think as Diane indicated, certain pieces of information about confidentiality, but others, depending on the position, need further training. And that will, some of that will be covered through Safe Schools. Some of it will be covered through, onboarding and orientation, depending on the position. So we're trying to be really clear about that, kind of in the job description and in the hiring processes and procedures to make sure those things happen.
Just to be clear, because it's a small community, and sometimes our substitutes might also be parents, and
Absolutely.
so I think.
Office
So,
support.
are you saying
Subs?
that substitutes do not go through?
No, they do go through the confidentiality
Okay.
piece. And what we have done, we're in transition between kind of our Safe School work, which will be automated and we'll be able to, keep track of better. But anyone who's in again, that's a big part, somebody who fills in the front office, any of our substitutes, that's a really important component. If they see things that are happening that provide them information that's confidential, they shouldn't be going home saying, I saw so-and-so, on crutches, or, that's not to be shared. And we go through a lot of those examples in the training and what constitutes not okay to share.
All right, moving on to, is everyone set there? Okay, detail policy 4, fail to operate facilities with appropriate accessibility and privacy. I just had a question, the part that was added, that and that we provide the appropriate level within all district buildings. So I wondered what appropriate level, what that actually meant, and then why did we take out when privacy concerns come up, we will take steps to address them.
Again, I'm trying to be clear on the interpretation, operating the facilities for accessibility and privacy. Those kind of go hand in hand, and I think privacy doesn't necessarily, it's confusing to some folks perhaps, but I'm simply just trying to say that we provide adequate level of, within our district buildings, of accessibility and privacy-related.
Yeah, I would add that. It's
Accessibility and privacy after appropriate level,
kind of hanging there.
because it's the appropriate level that doesn't really, is ambiguous of what you're pointing to until you just said that. And now I understand that it's pointing to of accessibility and privacy.
Oh, to the end.
Are there guidelines that we use?
Just put it right there.
Level.
Of accessibility and
Level.
privacy.
Oh, yes.
You don't know what level points to unless you specify
Right.
grammatically, right?
That's
That's the
good
issue. It's
feedback,
just that-
yeah.
Right.
Just,
I don't recall.
it's just hanging there.
Well, the other part that I just didn't know why it was taken out, that when concerns come up, we take steps to address them. So why would we strike that? That was the other question I had, because
I just
wouldn't
don't-
we want to address a
Yeah,
concern?
but again, I'm continue to try to, fall in line with, this is the policy and my interpretation. My interpretation of the policy is what I'm trying to state. My evidence probably, could be, when there are issues that come up, we work to resolve them. And my evidence should be, that when we have something that's out of compliance, we have a plan that's put in place and there's, I think I'm a little, adding that, I'm okay to add it, but I don't think it doesn't really fall into my interpretation.
Okay.
But,
It's better placed somewhere else.
Okay, I just needed some
Yep.
understanding about that. And then you attached the ADA report, thank you. Detail policy 5, fail to establish with students and parents/guardians a clear understanding of what may and may not be expected from the district. And you added ends policy, and that the ends policy is on the district website. The other piece that was here was about email, I think. There was a concern about email and what parents could expect in terms of a response. And I think in one of the questions you answered, David, last time, was that administrators were instructed that families should receive email within 5 days.
within a
And
general week of receiving an email, so.
should that be included?
Well,
So
I
people
just
know
think
what to
that's
expect?
what they may and may not expect from the district.
Or is it in the
As the,
handbooks?
well, I mean as the evidence,
Yeah,
like,
it's not in the handbooks, but in the last iteration of this, so the last time we went through this report, it came up as an issue that people didn't feel they were responded to in a expeditious way.
It seems like there ought to be some expectation for communication and how it's done, where to look.
I mean, it's a good idea to put it, write it in the handbook somewhere.
So where would we put that? Where would I put that?
Well, if you put it in the handbook, then access to the handbooks will cover it.
well, I think you said in one of the answers
Yeah,
that,
we-
administrate, I'm trying to,
No, you're right, it was in the
Where
5-day
that
kind of
was.
timeframe to respond. So fail to establish with students and parents and guardians a clear understanding of what they may and may not expect from the district.
so this was the response. I've discussed communication protocols with administrators and specifically have been clear that responses should be rendered within 5 school days. So that, could that be included as evidence here?
So is this where we would put it, you think?
This is
Their
where the question
expectations
came up.
So that could be added,
I think it could be evidence, but I agree that it should be a reference point for parents somewhere else in documentation that they can access on a regular basis. And, I mean, we could just reference it here as evidence, and then it'll become old evidence, but
well, let me make this suggestion. We have an admin, we have admin responses, so there may be the place where we put this in our handbooks. You know, and again, I can't recall, it seems like we do have in some of our handbooks about email, but if we embed it in the handbooks and we put evidence,
I see the issue here as being, how you're gonna communicate with that constituency.
well,
What can people expect by way of
That's right.
communications? And I think that it would be wise for you to do that, because the communication tools that are available are expanding rapidly, and people may be looking for techniques that aren't supported, okay?
yeah.
It'd be nice if you could say,
So I think it needs to, I need to look into the handbooks and see,
But that would be a future,
yeah, it would,
that would be future evidence.
correct.
Even though he's already told the administrators that that's what families should expect.
Yeah, but we don't, see, the handbooks are,
Well,
again,
you could add evidence of a meeting, you know,
Right.
and review with administrators, but it's not really documented to the
Okay.
receiving party.
The other, just in another point I had here about the 5 days, it's just, there has to be some judgment there too. I mean, if it's an emergency, you should get a response sooner than 5 days. Although if it's a urgent matter, you would be using, probably calling somebody, but,
right,
you know, there might
Those
be
are,
responses that need sooner than 5 days, so.
those fall, and I would say those fall into some different areas of decision-making, timely responses based on critical issues, you know. It's generally just trying to develop a communication expectation around feedback.
So it sounds like everybody's in agreement that it shouldn't be evidence this time around, but there should be
Next time.
something. What?
I was just a suggestion.
Kathy?
Can't you just reference that in the third bullet and just, you know, which addresses the mediums of communication, and can't you just say something to the extent that communities can expect
It's just not institutionalized yet. The problem, we
feedback
haven't,
in a timely manner? Do you have to be specific? Can't you just say, you know, in a timely manner and have that be the end of that?
I think it's probably right to
Something right
have it in the
there,
next.
just brief.
I just don't think David's reporting out on evidence now that supports compliance with this detail policy, so it would require some kind of report that said what was timely. So I think what we're talking about is really an opportunity for a future evidence to be created. But it gets at what you're saying.
And there's some agreement that it should be in a handbook too, so that's the other piece of that. Okay, detail policy 6, fail to limit the use of live security video systems to crisis situations and the immediate need of administrators for safety information or by district or building administrators to ensure student, staff, or community safety. And you added some information to the interpretation there.
Yeah, I guess I found the interpretation a little unwieldy.
No, I figured you probably would, but I'm trying.
I mean, I think what I understand you to be saying is that these monitors can be turned on and they can stay on as long as an administrator or the police have said that access is important to ensure the safety.
Correct.
Well, you could say that with fewer words.
Sure.
You could probably, and of course I would not put these words in your mouth because that would go against what I said the last meeting. But you could think about striking directed by, and you could think about striking to ensure student and staff safety. And the one other issue that I might have is that will is an awful strong word there for and will remain as opposed to may remain, because you kind of like are taking the discretion from the administrator. But those are only, you know, I want you to come up with your own, but those were suggestions.
I think, you know, that those suggestions make sense. I don't think it changes significantly interpretation.
No, it doesn't change I don't think. It's just,
No.
it just gets you there with
Yep.
fewer words and less opportunity for ambiguity.
Yeah, and I like the may versus will. Yeah, I think that,
Now, I have a bigger problem with the evidence, though.
Can I have a question? I have a question actually based on what Martin just said. And I agree that may be wordy and may seem unnecessary to ensure student and staff safety. But I also think it's important to maintain that there, just to,
Well, it's still there. It'd be turned on and may remain on when an administrator or police believe that access is important to ensure student, staff, or community safety. It's just said
Okay.
twice. You know, it has to be related to an assurance that it's needed
right,
for those purposes.
right, okay, yep.
So, I
Thank
mean,
you.
that's still there. And I find that the evidence does not give that assurance. I mean, you're talking about Chamberlain and Orchard, and I understand generally, and actually, I don't disagree with them being on, but you're not saying here that they need to stay on because of these concerns. You're not saying that because the world has gotten uglier since in the last year and 4 months, and that there's heightened concern for security of our schools, and that there's not good visibility, et cetera, et cetera. I think you owe that explanation here since you're keeping the cameras on.
Yeah, and I was trying to pull that in when I said, as a result of not having direct, clear sight to the main entrances, which is the evidence by which I cite to keep them on.
I think that's fine, it doesn't go far enough.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't go far enough.
Thus not ensuring, yeah, if that's the implication.
Okay?
Can I ask a question? I have a lot of questions. So we have put the beepers on the doors with the cameras there, and now that that's in place, do we need these monitors here now?
Well, some of the A-phones, they're called at the front entryways. Again, they really are, for all intents and purposes, they're really just a buzzer, you know. There is a camera function in them, but the clarity on the cameras and the directional visibility is not great. You can't really see left and right, and you can't see with clarity. So for locations that I've cited in here, you know, Chamberlain and Orchard and Markup particularly, the sight is difficult. And so on the small little A-phone at the desk, I'm going to exaggerate, it's about a 1.5 by 1.5 square that they're able to identify, and the person doesn't have the clarity. It does act as an appropriate switch to release the door to open, or to not, but it doesn't really have the clarity that we would like. And that's a problem in these locations where really we have we don't really have enough information. And that's in part what I cite in the evidence, while they're needed, added cameras on those front entryways.
And that's the question that this should answer. And I don't think you have
That's what I'm
to put
trying to
as
answer.
much detail in as you just gave her verbally. But no, I mean, but that's the question, and that's the answer, but can be, you know, condensed. And that's
For
what's
the
missing,
evidence.
I think, for the evidence.
Okay.
So.
Okay, detail policy 7. Fail to limit the use of security video recordings to inquiries by the police about criminal investigations. Any comments about the interpretation or evidence there? Okay. Detail policy 8, failed.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You guys are just trying to fly right by.
So,
This is our second review.
I know, hey, I can't be here all the time. I like to be because it's really impressive every time. So,
Suggest we name this the Kathy Sheffield 1, Kathy Sheffield 2
No, no, no,
policy
no.
rules. So for future reference, to
no,
make
I
sure.
don't want to see them get too watered down. That's, you know,
No, this is good. This is good.
ultimately what I was afraid of. So, the crossing out of the time frame for the maintaining of the cameras or the recordings is an issue because it shifts the use away from crisis to a punitive scenario, which is not, you know, what the intent was. So I'm wondering why you took that out.
Kathy's right, a couple of years ago, I remember a fairly lengthy discussion on this very topic.
There have been so many lengthy
Where
discussions.
we eventually concluded that some number was appropriate. 72 was the hour that was what
Well,
was settled
let
on.
me-
But basically for the reasons he cited, that
Well, let me just.
if there isn't a crisis identified within some reasonable period of time, then it's not a crisis anymore, okay?
Well, let me just tell you why I took that out. I mean, I think obviously there needs to be a number associated with, I mean, there needs to be a system in place by which it records and deletes. You can't have it continue in infinity. So the reason I'm taking that out is I think it provides too much public information to the period in time in which an event can happen, an event can be erased. And so while somebody could plot out some activity against our school, then I don't think it's appropriate that I put the specific amount of time in there. And while I'm fine to keep it somewhere for you, I don't think it is appropriate to make it so public. And that's the reason that I struck it, not because I want to change it, but I just don't want to publicize it. So that was my thinking and rationale.
Is there an alternate place you can suggest where it might be appropriately?
And then how to keep accountability if it's not stated
Well,
somewhere?
there's currently accountability in the monitoring reports by which they're requested, and there's a evidence that follows along between myself and the police chief. And so I think based on when the event occurs and when the request is wanted, there's almost evidence of that time. Really, I'm quite okay if I need to put it in. I just feel like it provides too much information.
Yeah, that was the discussion a couple of years ago.
That's right.
as I recall.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand what, I'm just trying to get my evil mind side here. And I can't understand what benefit that 72 hours, that information. I don't know what, maybe my imagination's not good.
Friday at midnight, I'm gonna do something to the school, and I know they're not in session on Monday, and so therefore I can do it and nobody will see it.
Well, maybe 72 hours is the wrong number. Maybe it should be some
Well,
other
again, I'm
number.
just choosing not
Yeah,
to
no,
have
I
us be
understand.
overly specific on that, but
Well, that's a good example, actually.
Yeah.
I think you should have
You thought
a
of it.
number.
amazing.
I do think you should have a number if you're not gonna be able to cover
It's not that I don't want a number, Kathy.
I
I just don't
understand.
think that the number should be so public.
I understand. I just am.
So, that's a good question on how we would do that for you. Maybe in the monitoring reports. I don't know, I'm not sure how to advise you on how to,
So I think,
Not make
you do have a monitoring report that
Yeah.
highlights incidents where this has been requested. So, I mean, and I've been involved in all these conversations, so this should be like Groundhog Day for me, but, one, this is specific to requests from the police in an effort to investigate criminal conduct. So there's something that's been reported at this point. You do file the report, so maybe in the monitoring report, you could put just the time the event occurred and when the request was made.
right, and that would provide
Does that make sense?
clarity to that.
Because then we'll know what the time period was.
Yeah, because we get the request, that's
Right, and you'd be denying it, yeah,
not available.
right.
I don't
I
want
think that
to,
addresses it.
that was
I
my,
don't know that it does. I'm sorry. I don't know that does because that doesn't actually. That's just your way of going about things. That's not dictating protocol, which is what this is here. This dictates your protocol, and if you don't have that here.
Well, it's
then it's just hearsay
validating,
or
it's
past
validating that an
memory or-
unpublished protocol was followed.
If we see something that that an event occurs and 14 days later, there's a request and they get the videotape,
Yeah, we're gonna
then we know there's a problem. I mean, then we know that there's a problem.
But how are you going to know that that's an issue if you don't have the rule to follow? I'm
Because
talking about boards go by, superintendents change, that type of thing. I stopped coming to the meetings. There are things that could happen. So it has to be where it has to be here. I can't see it being
Yeah,
anywhere
but
else.
do you understand David's
I
point
do.
about
I
think he's got a
do.
really good point.
I do.
So can you find something that would make you happy?
Is it just about me? I don't
No,
think it is just
it's
about
not,
me. I'm
but
just
No,
speaking
no.
for the.
You're involved in the discussion, and it would help expedite the discussion.
Well, hold up on one point, though. I mean, at the heart of this is there has been some criminal conduct that the police are now engaged and are requesting access to the videotape. So that in itself, from my perspective, goes beyond the potential for a disciplinary action. Because all those have already come into play before we even get to.
So I think the question would be, how long a period of time could it be before the police decide to ask for this data? I get personally, I get that once they've asked for it, now there's a reason to preserve it, perhaps for the duration of that case, okay? In fact, maybe it becomes evidence that goes forever, okay? But the question is do you want to have, and I think this is where Kathy's headed, maybe she sees a different thing, it is that it seems reasonable that there should be a finite period of time. David seems to accept that there should be something like that. The issue has been how public do we make that time?
Right.
And what duration should it be?
Well, I would submit that nobody but the people in this room ever read this monitoring report. So I would think the 72 hours right here is as private as we probably can get in the school district.
I think we
just
should be
saying.
careful about saying it, but.
Well, what is the pleasure of the board? This is evidence. David has made the recommendation with a compelling argument why it should be out. I don't know if, do we take action on this, or?
Well, I think I think this is gonna come back for another reading, so
Okay.
some direction and advisement on this. I mean, I can look into what would be, I can come up with some other ideas on how to word it, do it.
Is there,
I don't
is
know.
there an audit, is there a process where the equipment can automatically erase the tape at 72 hours? So
Mhm.
that's built in?
Yeah, it is what it does.
Wait,
That's
can I
what's-
go back to David's logic for just a moment as I've been thinking this over? Don't mean to take up more time than necessary. So you have the Friday to Monday thing. Monday's a day off, right? They're not keeping something for longer than 72 hours. So are you saying if something was done Friday or if something's going to be done Monday? Because if it's going to be done Monday, it's 72 hours from there. So
I'm trying to provide some example for a potential bridging activity where, half day of school on Friday, nothing on the weekend, and we're off on Monday,
and so something has not
somebody
gone.
figures out that, hey, I can do this, and because of
But that would be criminal, not crisis.
Well, but I'm simply just saying that, for us in ensuring the safety of our schools and our property, this is
Wait, but that's property.
our safety of our
That's
school.
criminal, that's not crisis.
But safety of our school, it could be criminal, that somebody would do something.
Doesn't say crisis.
That's
The
criminal.
policy is criminal investigation.
That, when I look at the evidence here,
But it's supposed to be a crisis.
if I don't
thing.
look at the longer than 72 hours, I still think there's compliance. I think David, I'm sorry, Kathy, but I think David can put the hours on there or not. Perhaps the one thing you could add is recordings are stored for a reasonably defined period. And I would trust the discretion of the superintendent because we have the checks on that by looking at these police reports to see if it's a reasonable time. So, I, bottom line, think that the evidence is fine for reporting compliance on policy 7 with that struck. So, I don't know if everybody else does, but that's right.
Again, about going forward, how are you gonna know what a reasonable time frame is?
I just, this is the balance, and I think the balance is that it's reasonable, and future boards can look at the reports and see the time frame between when there's been a request and whether the videotape was provided.
And we keep
So-
iterations of all the reports, so if they
Yeah.
go back far enough, they can see that, right? Isn't that correct? Yes.
Just to tie off
Yeah.
that thought, is there a requirement that there be such reports reported to the board?
Well, you have an appendix B.
We always do get these, yeah, we asked for that as evidence at one point, to always get
It's
that.
someplace else, and, if that's there, I could live with that.
Yeah, there
As long as it's,
there is
it's there.
Yeah, there should be some
Nexus, right,
consistency
between
between reports, because I always look at the previous times
too.
report to see how it's changed. And actually, it's struck out when it's provided to us as well. So if all of a sudden we're not being provided with Appendix B, that'll be caught, because that was requested at one point, that we get that report to monitor this. So.
Okay.
Detail policy 8, I read it. Any comments? I know that the tab for the suggestion box has been moved to the top of the website. moving on, everybody? Good? Overall policy wording, with respect to interactions with students and parents, guardians, or those applying to be students and their parents, guardians, the superintendent shall not cause or allow conditions, procedures, or decisions that are inequitable, untimely, vague, undignified, or unnecessarily intrusive. Comments, thoughts, ideas, suggestions?
I still think the evidence is inadequate. I don't think it addresses what you have in your interpretation or in the policy, and it does not give me your reading on whether students, parents, guardians have been treated in a way that's not respectful, and that there are no conditions, procedures, or decisions that are inequitable, untimely, etc. And I think a statement does need to be in there. It seems like it's kind of like too easy to just say that none of those things happened. But if it's in here as evidence, and I know of contrary evidence, it also allows me to say, well, no, I don't agree, which that's not the case right now. But I mean, I think you have to address that. And maybe there is something that happened that was untimely or vague or undignified or inequitable. And this is the place where that should be flagged, that happened, and this is how it was resolved. But I think just not having anything in there is not sufficient.
It's hard to know the scope of how to give you that, you know? So part of what, you know, in the policies and procedures, as well as the feedback process that we have, that we're responding to that, that we have policies and procedures in play with whether there's a student matter that comes forward and we, you know, so I'm not sure. I have to think about that some more, Martin, around how to, this is a particular, overall is hard to summarize into evidence, I find. I don't, so I'll work at it.
So is there any sort of I don't know if I'm using the right word, but any sort of a grievance policy, practice that would highlight any of those things that you could say there was no activity in it while that was provided?
I don't really have a way that, you know, we don't roll those up into a data set. So, you know, there are grievance processes outlined in some of our contracts. But
they didn't present any of these inequitabilities or
Well, I
anything?
feel that that's not really complete, because I have a whole bunch of other employees, we have other, you know, student and parent matters.
But the thing is, this policy is for parents and guardians, not for
And
staff.
students.
And so, I think grievance,
Well, again, I think
grievances
it
of
applies to
staff.
students.
Or complaint.
Because I know it has other connotations.
Yeah, okay.
Is there anything through the suggestion box that comes in?
Well, we get those come in through, that's one, what I'll say, mode of, you know,
So I'm
solicitation.
trying to say, can you make some statement that there is no evidence using these vehicles
I don't know, but,
that anything's happened?
yes, yeah, I kind of feel like it's hard to be fully adherent to the evidence, because I don't, you know, if I misreported it, how do I report it with
That's
everything included? I mean, because there's so many different places where
it's
people,
probably impossible to be 100% complete, so all you
So-
can do is be compliant to the spirit.
yeah,
of
so
what's
that's
going
why I
on,
kind of said the
substantially
policies
to the
and
spirit-
procedures. But, you know, I think that is, I recognize that it doesn't give you a lot, but I follow up to those, or I,
If you could go following that, another step saying that while they've been made available, they've produced no evidence to the contrary to this thing. I mean, I'm just trying to find a way to
well, I could give
get the
some.
closure on the
I
thing.
could
that's
give
all.
some, you know, what I have available, like on those, you know what I mean, what's come in through like the suggestion box in complaint process as one example, or as an example of following procedures and
For example, there
processes.
were
But I don't want that to be
33
then be that,
suggestions that
because I
looked as
said,
they were followed up on, there was no evidence that they were in contradiction to this, or there were,
Yeah.
and they took the following action.
Well,
But
can we, I
this
mean,
just says there's mechanisms, it doesn't say what the result is of the mechanism.
one of the, I mean, I feel like it's the elephant in the room. We're kind of, it's glaring as the fifth grade transition. I'm not sure why we wouldn't be referencing that there was a perception that a decision might have been vague or inequitable. So I think the board has gotten that feedback. There's the perception of that. And I think some of the, mechanisms that have been put in place are certainly the process with the working committees, but also including it on the updates on board agendas. So,
Yeah, right.
I mean, doesn't,
Evidence, that's good,
I
yeah.
think that's right. And I
Yeah.
don't think it fits into any of the other detail policies either. In this particular policy.
The overall.
But
It fits
maybe
the overall.
I think maybe the difference is when you get into this issues of inequitable, untimely, vague, undignified, or unnecessarily intrusive, as it relates to treatment of students, parents, and guardians, it may be perceptual. So,
Then what am I doing
right.
as evidence to resolve, to respond?
And again, I don't necessarily want to single out an example, but that's hard not to look at a recent situation that I think that perception existed based on feedback the board was getting, and certainly you were getting, and you clearly have put several things in place to address that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me do some more work on the
Okay.
evidence, if that works for you.
Can I just ask you, would you say that he is in compliance then, based on putting the processes in place?
I would
You're-
say, I think the process was in place before. I think the perception of whether it was inequitable or vague or whatever the perception is, I think it fell into one of those categories. So I would almost say maybe putting it more on the agenda would have been a specific response to communicate. I think attending PTO meetings, there were a number of actions that I think, or evidence that would support managing that perception. The process, I feel, was in place, though.
Right, and I guess I would go one step further, and it will not be, this is not friendly or nice or whatever, but, I think that the administration caused that condition to occur. It may have been a perception, but it was caused by an untimely communication that wasn't vague. It was very definitive that a choice had been made. So that was caused. Now, it's been remedied. There's been attempts to remedy it, and I think that's the important thing, that David has followed up on that and has tried to be fixing that. But that is one of the types of issues. It's a good example that has to, I think, be addressed if it's not addressed in any of the detail policies, which I don't believe it is. But just doing the detail policies isn't enough. You have to look at that overarching policy as well.
So it sounds like we're not taking action on this tonight. It sounds like there's a couple of wordsmithing in a
Corrections,
couple areas you're going to go back and
Yep.
consider.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll put this on the agenda for the next time for action.
So my recommendation is that we, just go to the places that needed additional work rather than starting all over and going through the whole thing again.
You didn't have fun doing that?
Well, just to expedite things. Does that make sense?
Reasonable suggestion.
Color coding sequence, which between Delina and Meg, they'll hang me if I try to come up with that.
How about pink?
Yeah, so we'll come up with a place where the ones that you didn't have any trouble
Right.
with, we can move on and we'll just
Right,
get to
and we'll
those.
just start from where we left off
You
with
got
the
it.
changes.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to 3.2.
So again, in your packet is the job description. Cover page has just, I had a couple board members that provided some feedback to the job description. I suspect that others will want to weigh into that as well. The highlighted areas in red are some of my responses, or actually in black are my responses, of which some indicate just I put it into the job description, which is attached with the kind of the corrected version. again, this is hard to kind of go through the process of change, because that first one was very busy. So the one that's attached is corrected, so if you could work from this one, I think now would be the most helpful, and I would go about it in the same way, where I would include your other board members' feedback, and then a response, and then corrected. And it has draft on it, obviously, so. I mean, part of this I want to be clear about is that the job description is really an important component for any position in the district. The job description by statute also has some requirements that are expected. So there's a melding of your want and need as a district, but also the statutory requirements of the position as well. And so in some ways, that makes it a long job description.
What's the last date of this? When was it last updated? Do you know that?
4/7/14.
No, I know that was.
I saw 84.
Yeah,
It was 84.
I don't know, I saw that on the printout.
it was quite some time ago, yeah. So there were iterations of rehires, of, I think, clarification of roles and responsibilities, but, you know, again, the emphasis wasn't done on the job description, and again, with Karen on board, that's, as you've heard already many times, a focus is on our job descriptions, which then lead to hiring practice as well as evaluation clarity. And so,
Where you're citing the statute here as the chief executive officer, is that the only place where there's a specific requirement, or is there more statutory requirement that's not?
well, you'll see where there's highlighted in blue where I put them, and then also on the back page, I think I just kind of cited, included in the Title 16, where you see those duties of the superintendent, which are statutory requirements. And then I think there's also other ones, you know, that statutes that apply attendance and discipline, school property. I mean, it's a little bit overwhelming. It's a little bit scary, to be honest with you.
Dated 4/7, is that based on the feedback or no?
Yes, it's
It is.
based on
Okay.
feedback that I think, Julie, you gave me and Elizabeth. And that's also what's on the cover page. So again, I'm open to feedback around how to kind of work through this, but it would be my desire for other board members to weigh in, and with this kind of newer information, and we put it on our next board agenda and keep working at it.
Okay. Great. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 11, consider and approve the school district calendar.
So this has come to you a couple times, actually, or was on the agenda a couple times. And part of this was really, we found a mistake, you know, anytime you count the calendar, days, but we needed to add a student day. And the day in which we've added, which I think is important to note, we've made no real changes at the beginning of the year in August. The change from the last iteration you had, actually, and help me, Stuart, January, correct?
Yes,
We changed our January.
19th.
Say that again?
January 19th, we will have
Right.
students in school for Martin Luther King.
So January 19th is the identified Martin Luther King Day, and there's been a fair amount of energy within our district, as you know, around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And last year, I think you were probably all aware that we did a fair amount with PACT and Martin Luther King Day, and celebrating, actually brought students in on that particular day. So this will give us the opportunity as a district to do some things that we think will be connected learning opportunities, but will give us the day that we need without adding it to the end of the calendar, which would make, I think, far more complicated for students to come for one day. So this, again, was vetted through our administrators.
So is it the intent that it would get used in a way similar to the way it was used this year, or that it will be used as another academic day?
It'd be used as an academic day and not a day off for students.
But this
But
year,
the focus would be to utilize it as a day of doing work around issues of diversity and inclusion, because it is the day, not to ignore that we're in school on Martin Luther King Day.
So were you short a day because of the extended Christmas break?
Well, the way Christmas falls, I mean, the calendar, has some complexity to when you bring kids back and for what period of time. So again, we weighed that out, but again, very much a focus for us, and it was on our discussion from last year around MLK Day, similar to our Veterans Day. We think it's appropriate that we celebrate that and can provide recognition to that. We needed to add from the last one, to be clear, we needed to add another day. We were at 179 student days, and our contract is for 180 days. And as you know, the way this calendar is built, if we have a inclement weather cancellation day, it becomes a flex day for teachers. They need to fill out and provide us with evidence of what they've done on that day. We don't make that day up. So that 180 day is important to us, or to me, having that on the calendar. And it worked out that could satisfy that need.
So can I just ask, are other Chittenden County schools off on Martin Luther King Day?
It varies. Many are off, but there are also others that are on. I think that if it was just on with no reason or rationale, that would be a problem. But as Stuart identified, and I think administratively across the district, all of our administrators are in 100% agreement that this is a great opportunity for us to be able to. Again, my worry has always been, I'm worried about others being off, but I'm not worried about celebrating what I think is to be appropriate. And many of our kids, when they're off on that day, they'll simply say they're off, unless moms and dads and guardians give them a further depth of conversation about the day. And I think it's a missed opportunity for the work that we're trying to do. So
it was just an aside comment. It was an amazing turnout at the high school with so many different student groups, staff, community members that came out and to school on a day off. It was pretty amazing.
So there's that energy too, Julie, from our current experience that's fed that. And probably should have been identified, earlier in the first iteration, but it fits perfect.
So do I have a motion to approve the calendar as recommended?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's approved. All right, we have 11A, the big picture funding.
So, I talked to you a little bit about this, David, but I would like to better understand what happens with our one lottery space, our one space in the lottery, and our space within the big picture program for kids that are coming out from outside of our district, and how we're funded for that.
So currently, let me just say, in the past, through our choice agreements, we had the opportunity for kids to come to our school through agreement. And this was predominant with Essex, Burlington, and CVU, and they were paid. And as you know, with the onset of Act 129, that went away when the student graduated or left. So those students that were freshmen are still being paid for by those districts until they graduate or leave. We had to discuss that with all of them, as you recall. For anybody new that comes in, we have created, through our cap requirement, there's not an exorbitant number of students, but there is some. We have to abide by the law and the regulations, so we set that cap count. The cap count that we set was for our program within the high school. We have a separate cap count for the big picture program, or we have a cap. There's a number there. We don't want to make it so that we can't bring in somebody from the outside, but we want to be mindful of the cost. So currently, I think there was 1 slot or 2 slots open for outside. And so through the lottery process, the lottery was drawn and we notified. What I do know, and it's probably more widespread, I don't know, but we did get some feedback from one parent where they got an acceptance letter from Burlington. I believe it was from Burlington. Isn't that right? And it was like, we were surprised by that. And Burlington was very apologetic to that. They made a mistake. They should have never sent that letter.
What do you mean? I don't understand what that
They sent the letter that they had been accepted into the big picture program, through choice.
From the Burlington school?
Yeah. So, I don't really know what how that happened, again, I think the parent provided it to us.
The student provided it.
Student. So, again, through the lottery, through the choice process, there's delineated paperwork, and I can't tell you all of the intricate paperwork that has to happen, and then how the information gets back to the student or the parent. But obviously, there was a problem with that. We don't have an exorbitant amount of space for anybody coming in. We do want to be careful that we don't not have some flexibility for an outside student. So
what I don't understand is this. I heard today about a kid who was accepted to the Big Picture program, but did not get into the lottery. And so how does that work? I don't understand that.
accepted to big picture.
Like he got notice that he was accepted into our Big Picture program. He lives in Burlington, and yet he was not one student accepted in the lottery.
I don't know. I have to.
Isn't there like 2 spaces that we approved for big picture separate from overall lottery?
That's right.
Two?
Was it 2?
I think it was.
your notes from last year. I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Can we
So we'll
find
look.
that out, Delina? Can we look that? Or where is it?
So, but is this the
I can look it
student?
up.
Is this the student that I'm?
I don't know if
Yeah.
we're talking
so
about the
it's
same
Burlington.
person.
Burlington, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can look into it. I mean,
But I guess to Julie's question, though, is Burlington funding the big picture student?
well, if Burlington's going to if they're going to approve somebody coming in, they would have to be paying for them, right?
Well, that
No.
one obviously.
For
yeah.
those identified spaces that we identified within our cap, that's not for payment. We would not get any revenue for that.
And we had last year, Jason came in,
Yeah.
and I
That's right,
think
and we had
Patrick
some
Burt.
exposure.
Yes.
And there was, they asserted, and I think we agreed, that it wasn't gonna cause more cost as long as they were under this cap. It wasn't gonna lead to any South Burlington students being turned away.
That's correct.
And that, in fact, having closer to that cap makes the whole program more enriching for everybody who's in there. And I think was the basis that I recall, that I agreed that we should have a couple
We also discussed that
spaces.
a student coming in through big picture would not be able to
go back.
transition out.
That's right.
Yeah.
But then my question is, if there are 2 spots in Big Picture, say, that we've approved, then how are those 2 spots chosen? Because there's gotta be some kind of equity to all the people who wanna get into Big Picture if there are more than 2 people.
Yeah, so the question is on whether the lottery, how the big picture lottery works. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I can update you on that. I think it's better that I need to look into how they, I know they have a process,
Okay.
and it's
Something,
very
John?
popular,
Yeah.
So I brought the notes, the minutes from July 10th of the school board meeting. Administrator's recommendation for big picture school set a big picture capacity limit of 30. Ensure all South Burlington resident students have a primary opportunity to enroll. Point 2, given that 22 students have been accepted into big picture school, open 4 lottery slots to non-resident students are on the current waiting list for the 2013-14 year. Students will be accepted into the Big Picture program, but matriculation into regular program at South Burlington High School will not be permitted.
So it was more for this
On that 1 year because we had 22.
Right, have we done a different number for this year,
I think
or are
it's the
we
same
too
number.
late to have?
don't think it's gonna
No,
be
it's
4.
not
Well,
gonna
no,
be the
it's the
same.
same cap number, right? It's
Same
the-
cap.
Yeah. Well, let me look in at what we've, and
Thanks,
I think the
Lauren.
process would be, on the process by which that happens, how they come in, so.
So that can go on a future.
There was one more point. I realize.
Sorry, John, I cut you off.
It's okay. Maintain 4 open slots to be filled by South Burlington students. That's where the number came from. So there's 30, 22 enrolled, 4 SB, 4 outside. So that's the accounting for last year.
And it sounds like that has to happen every year, right? Like
Well, under
based
Act
on
120.
graduates, people that might go to another district, so that should be set. Like the total will always be
Yeah.
30, but there could be other numbers, like maybe we would only have 2 spots or 3, or, it has to be looked at every year, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it should, that's what, kind of what we've done in the past. I think, I can't recall what we've said. I'll look into it, and I think the other part, the question also is how kids get into it, is what you're asking.
Right.
Yeah. Through the same lottery, should it be the same lottery? Yeah. I know there's a process, so.
Thanks.
Yep. I added it to our future agenda items.
All right, set the agenda for the May 7th meeting. And we already
Added.
have follow on for 2.1. So we'll have to, under 11, we'll have to add 2.1 back in, right?
Mm-hmm.
For action?
Yep.
Is there someone on, are we all on curriculum?
Actually, Diane, we looked it up, Diane and Martin,
Oh, that's right.
our curriculum was reported on earlier. We were, waiting for some changes, so I'll be in touch with you to
Did
set
we
up a
already
time.
do what we were supposed to?
No.
Okay. It wasn't that memorable.
The only positive thing is,
I just wondered if we were already on it.
doing this by committee still?
Yes.
yep, it was, the committee, my understanding was the committees would still work. It would be on how the report out process would be, and that.
I was just trying to get out of it, but okay.
Martin, would you
Yes.
prefer to do it by committee or by group?
No, by committee is
Okay.
fine to get it started.
The committee's
If,
been
if,
effective.
if David thinks it makes it more efficient, then I'm all for it.
Well, that's fine, except I just want clarity about the questions. Like, should we bring, if Martin and I look at it and have questions, do we bring those questions directly here? We don't submit them ahead of time.
No, we do submit them ahead of time. That's what we do.
Without an expectation
Without
for a
an
response.
expectation.
The response could come
Okay.
at the meeting.
Because I think what was
If
challenging the last time is that
Yeah.
we were sort of choreographing different pieces of paper. So I just want to be sure that everybody is good with the timeline.
We agreed to
and-
was the expectation that questions would be submitted by the subcommittee, but in recognition of the fact that there's not likely enough time for administration to respond, that whatever responses could be addressed would be live at the meeting and further discussion based on the subcommittee's feedback at that time. So it would really be a working session.
And I think that's a really good idea for another reason. Martin and I might have some ideas, and if they get changed ahead of time, you guys might disagree with us. I don't know how that would possibly happen, but it could. And, but you know what, if the changes aren't made until after we meet, then everybody has a chance to have input, I think. So what I said was probably really redundant, but it's getting late.
Did you have something, Stuart?
Well, this is just a report that I'm not sure that I've ever really captured what the board has been interested in.
Oh, yeah,
So
now I remember.
This is that report. So I'm actually going to send the copy from the last time I reported out to you all, and we'll have a dialogue from there, so that we really begin to move in the direction that the board desires.
So we need to add the form-based code, the T4 item on here. And is there anything else?
We just had a future agenda item that we wanted to not forget about, and that was big picture. Big picture, so that should, I think, probably could come under my report, maybe.
Okay.
I think we're good. Let's see, we can take anything off. We still keep city, school, methadone, 5th grade.
What are school action plans?
Those are our school action plans under AYP, No Child Left Behind.
Okay. So you may want to put that under. Okay. Anything else for future agenda items?
Just wondering about tonight, from the dialogue we had with the city? Was there anything we should capture in there? We have master planning. Wonder if we should call out the
Maybe do
activity of
slash
that.
financial stewardship.
Yeah,
for
right.
that. Just keep them together.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you wanted to take an item off the consent agenda.
Correct. I did. Thank you. So I would like to ask permission to take the leave of absence of Amy Pasadente off so I can talk about it to you before acting on.
Is the board in agreement on that? Okay, so we have, our consent agenda includes resignation of Linda Barnes at the high school. Do I have a motion to accept Linda's resignation?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, yeah, please thank her for her service. I know
Okay.
she's got a consulting practice she's looking to expand.
Right. And so can I just talk to you a little bit about the other one you've taken off? So Amy Pasadente, she's been with us now for a few years. She's was out on leave for this entire year, and she did make a request to me to continue another year's leave. And I don't think that's a good thing, and so I'm suggesting to you that you not approve that. It's not because she's not an excellent teacher, but I think when it extends beyond a year, I have some past practice here that they remain the contract holder long-term, and I don't think it's beneficial to the district moving forward. And so I'm suggesting to you that it's denied. Generally, I would do that kind of on my own, but it was in part connected to the board. It's a request to you, to the board. So that's why it appeared in front of you. But again, I'm not suggesting that she be approved.
And is your recommendation consistent with past practice?
Correct. It is.
Any other board questions or comments? Okay, do we have we have to take action, correct? Do we have a motion to,
Can I ask a question? First,
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
apologize. Would this, I want to make sure I understand, because you said that you normally would take this action yourself and not bring it to the board. I mean, is this normally something that would be before the board, a request for leave of absence? I just want to make sure I understood that.
Other requests like
You have, and so, again, I think it is consistent with what we've done in the past, that these are on there. Typically, a leave of absence or a resignation you deal with. So again, I've kind of kept consistent here. I don't believe I've ever, I can't recall it, whether I've not done it this way, but part of it is making sure you're aware of the request for leave. She's a contract holder.
Well, I guess my question with this, well, maybe it is appropriate. I'm just wondering, is it an appropriate thing that the board should have to pass judgment on? And maybe it is, but I think it's a question that
We do have
should
consent agenda items for
hiring
resignations, for
and
hires, and for
resignations.
leaves.
Okay, all right, fair enough. That's fine. I just wanted to confirm
Do
that.
we have a policy on leaves that makes it clear that anything beyond 1 year would
No.
be an exception?
It's at the discretion of the superintendent and/or designee, and I'm happy to provide the board with kind of past practice,
Well, you've said that, you've stated that. I just wondered if there was a guideline that was being,
There really isn't. I mean, I guess there could be a
it sounds
extenuating.
to me like it's a sensible process and criteria.
It doesn't mean that the employee or this individual will never have the opportunity to come back. What it means is that their break in seniority and service would be.
And they would have to apply for an open position,
Correct.
right? They
And
don't
go
get an
through the
automatic
process. Yeah.
re-entry.
But on the other side, you have to remember that somewhere who is taking the place of somebody out on leave is a person who's going to do a year and might do another year and then might not be here.
Yeah.
And so their existence in the district and the good work that they're doing is affected, and they may not stay for the second year. So then you have a transition, and so I'm very sensitive to the request for a leave for the circumstances, that are identified through family medical leave and others. But I think when it goes on for more than a year, then it's not in the best interest of students.
When the leave was approved, that's currently in force, that it was for a one-year duration?
Yes. However, when somebody goes out on a leave, that they don't necessarily know it's going to be for the whole year.
No, but it's approved for a one-year.
That's right, absolutely. I remember part of I cannot extend, leaves beyond, what the board approves. Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we accept David's recommendation to deny this request for leave.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on AP Order 37? Announcements?
So you do have these at your place as well. The big picture, South Burlington students, service learning, term presentations. Some of you, I know, attended these in the past, and you're welcome to do so again. This is your invitation. The event titled Are Kids All Right is being held on March 19th, 12 to 1. Lunch is included, and it's going to be in the South Burlington City Hall Community Room at 575 Dorset. During this event, students will make presentations on a wide variety of issues connected to the well-being and mental health, including but not limited to how schools can be more proactive in dealing with mental health issues, current trends in youth risk behavior survey, and the barriers to treatment for teens and their families. So I know there's a lot of work and effort going into this, and again, just want to make you aware of that.
I'm going to make a recommendation in hopes that we have some feedback from the public on a board evaluation and superintendent feedback, that Martin, you see if we can collect those and maybe report out at the start of our next meeting. Does that make sense?
Sounds fine.
Yeah, well, Kathy hasn't filled it out in court either.
Well, they can right now.
Can I ask a quick question that's following on the announcements? Do you have any word of when sophomore exhibitions are, and if you can make sure that we get invited to
You got it.
participate? Because last year somehow we were missed, and I missed doing it.
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
I like those too.
Sophomore exhibition.
All right. Do I have a motion to go into executive session for purposes of discussing a legal matter, personnel, and collective bargaining, where premature public knowledge would clearly place the board at substantial disadvantage?
You need a motion.
I need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor? All right. Thank you.
Okay.